Hi, and welcome to the Adversity Psychologist Podcast. Am I allowed to have secret favourite episodes? I'm going to put it out there. So I have, can I call you my colleague, former colleague? I have Susie Booth with me today, who is also known as the parent therapist. We used to work in the same clinic together, which is really exciting. Would you like to say hello? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to be on. Yeah, me and Tara used to be like work roomies, didn't we? We
We
were next door to each
were.
other. So yeah, I'm Susie Booth. I'm a qualified psychotherapist, accredited psychotherapist, and couples counsellor. And what I specialise in is in helping people with the experience of parenting. So the impact that that has on us, the transition into parenthood, managing expectations, pressures, and the impact that it has on relationships. So I can't tell you about parenting. I can't tell you how to get your child to stop having a tantrum. In fact, if anybody could tell me how to get my child to stop having a tantrum, that would be great. But yeah, what I do is talk to people about the experience of being a parent,
which we don't talk about enough. So we're going to delve into some stuff that's a little bit different today. I'm going to use the word different. So I'm a parent, you're a parent. I have a 15 and nearly 11-year-old. You're kind of at the other end, aren't you, of the spectrum?
Yeah, I've got a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. So yeah, it's
which
newer
I think
to me.
Make for a good discussion. I know a lot of my colleagues and friends, I've told them we're going to be recording this episode, are looking forward to it because it's the kind of tricky stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit about how relationships get impacted when you become parents. And I guess as well, maybe we should bring in that, becoming a parent can have different forms. So I have friends who've adopted, I have friends who have blended families, friends who have given birth to their own children. So there's a huge spectrum. But where should we start in terms of, let's use the word adversity.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? And I was thinking about this because this is the Adversity Psychologist Podcast, and for relationships, for couples, in a way, there is no bigger adversity than bringing children in. And I guess at the very beginning, I want to kind of caveat that and just acknowledge that having children also is such a privilege, and not everybody who wants to do that is able to have children. But for today, we're going to be thinking of the little people as an adversity.
The little people, I like that.
The little people, because actually, the impact on people's relationships is massive. Essentially, as soon as you have children, as soon as you become parents, your relationship changes. It has to change. So if we think about relationships in terms of like a Venn diagram, we have, me and we have you, and our relationship is that bit in the middle where the two of us overlap. And of course, when we become parents, we go through that transition. Both of us change. So for women, it's called their matrescence, and for men, it's called their putrescence. That is their transition into parenthood.
I didn't know this. I like this.
Yeah, there's actual words because it's such a massive change. I mean, the scale of which we change is similar to, if not bigger than, adolescence.
Wow.
So that's how big a change and a transition we're going through. And so if you think about that Venn diagram, if we've both changed, that bit in the middle where we overlap has to change. And I think people don't realize that. They expect it to stay the same, and then they're shocked and they're saddened when actually it's different.
Yeah, because I guess as well, it depends. So some people might have a relationship and have kids fairly soon in that relationship, or I don't know if you're a blended family or you're adopted. Your journey is going to be different in terms of maybe how long you've been together, when kids come along, what that looks like. But I guess it's interesting. I've got a 15-year-old and I've never really thought about, how did we individually change as people, and then the impact then on the relationship itself.
Yeah, and it's a really important thing to do because we don't make sense anymore without, I guess, like understanding that change. And then our relationship doesn't make sense. We're not being then intentional with our relationship because we're just going with it. I mean, kids come in, don't they? And they dilute, they stretch, they change the shape of everything. Yeah, and what we're left with then is something that we don't always recognize.
And then the kind of tricky thing, how often do we talk about this? With our friends, with each other, in our relationship, with family members, I wonder. Do you think there's a bit of shame or stigma about talking about relationships changing, especially if it's negatively?
Yes, I think there's shame and there's stigma. And I think also the difficulty that we have is that it's really normalized. So it's so normal, it's so natural to have kids. People have been doing it
Yes.
since we existed. And
Yeah.
so there's this sense of like, okay, well, you've had a child. Well, so have loads of other people. So, and
Yeah.
what we tend to do is focus on the child. So when somebody has a baby, we tend to say, how's baby getting on? How's baby doing?
Yes.
The next layer of that is then, how are you doing? But what we don't ever ask people is like, how's your relationship doing?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about health visitors. It's always that used to annoy me a little bit. Is that all right to say? The whole, how's baby? How's mum? I'd be like,
Mum, oh my gosh, when the health visitor calls me mum, I absolutely hate it.
and I know that, they probably mean well, it's a term of endearment maybe to them, but I used to find that hard. But I don't think anyone ever asked, how are you both? How is your
Yeah,
relationship? And maybe an
yeah.
elephant in the room, do we ask each other? Because sometimes if you do notice stuff, we don't want to go there either, do we? So I'm wondering if you almost got like that perfect storm.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, quite a lot of the time we have this loyalty to our partners as well, which is lovely. So we don't want to be seen as kind of slagging them
Yes.
off, complaining about them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and actually, there's so much that happens between couples that isn't even about the other person. What I see so much in the couples work that I do is resentment between couples who have children.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I see. And quite often, it's not
Interesting.
actually that either person's doing anything wrong, it's misplaced resentment. So it's resentment that actually belongs to the kids. Like, how hard
Yes.
is it to admit that you resent your children? This tiny
Absolutely.
being who you chose to have,
Yes.
actually, you resent that they're not sleeping, you resent that they cry a lot, you resent, all the admin tasks they come with. And this goes right up the ages when they're at school. You resent, I've got to buy them more uniform, they've grown again. You know, it's
Yeah.
really hard to admit we resent our children. And
Absolutely.
so we look around and it's like, where can this resentment go? Where's this going to land? And it's like, oh, there's my partner. Let's just
Absolutely.
put it onto them. The other place that resentment comes from, I've experienced misplaced resentment, is societal stuff.
Right.
So, this is 2024, we're in now. What we're living in at the moment is a time of real chronic stress. The highest expectations that we've ever had. Mums are supposed to be parenting full time, they're supposed to be working full time, they're supposed to be, bossing it at work, but being the really patient, loving, attentive mother.
Yes.
Men are still essentially supposed to be providing. They're also now, the expectations of them are going up in terms of that they should be doing their fair share of stuff at
Yeah.
home. And nobody's got time for all of it. Nobody has got time to get everything done to the standard and the level that we are expecting of ourselves and that society is expecting of us. And of course, we look around and we think, well, society is telling me I'm supposed to be able to do all of this stuff. And as far as I can see, which is often incorrect, everybody else is managing it. So if we're not managing it, what's going wrong with us? And of course, what you feel as an individual is like, well, I know I'm giving everything that I can. I am completely maxed out. So if we're not getting all this done, it must be that my partner's not doing enough. They're not doing their fair share. And so then that resentment grows about your partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, do you think social media plays a role when you're scrolling through Instagram and people are putting forward this image of how they are? Here's me working, parenting, happy, doing it all.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking, that how that might perpetuate that kind of expectation,
absolutely.
really.
Yeah, it does. Because, we still don't put the crap stuff on social media. And and I talk about this so much, and yet my Instagram page, my personal Instagram page, still
Interesting.
highlight reel. I still am not putting the stuff on there that's oh, it's not that I'm not putting stuff that's not true, but it's obviously it's filtered out the bad stuff.
Excuse me. Absolutely, it is. It's not the Weetabix on the shoulder when you get to work. I remember in the NHS, sometimes I'd drive up the motorway, be sat in a meeting and realise that I got either baby sick or Weetabix, always Weetabix, I don't know why. on my shoulder, but I'd never kind of just own it. It'd be embarrassment, shame, I'm not presentable, rather than, oh, look,
Yeah.
this is life, right?
Yeah. And we're not posting on there, are we, that actually I really lost my temper this morning and I shouted at them. We don't post that. Even, like this morning, my morning has been get up, get the kids ready, one to preschool, the other one the other side of town to nursery, back here, set up for the podcast. And, I'm sat here like, oh, I'm so calm. And, but actually this morning it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. There's so much to get through. How is this supposed to be manageable? Yeah. And that, ends up being between partners. Oh, why is he not helping me more? Why is he not doing more? Why does this feel like it's all on me? And actually quite often between
Yes.
couples, both of them are feeling that because both people are struggling.
And how often are we saying and being compassionate with what we're holding? Because is it all right to say, do you come across people, so because I've noticed this in my friends, my own relationship, that there might be a bit of, I'm doing more, or my stuff is, being put by the wayside, but actually you both might be feeling that. But when you're stressed and overwhelmed with deadlines, you've got to log on for a podcast. So there's that, well, I have to do that. But does my stuff then sometimes feel very different to my partner's stuff?
And what you see in couples work is a lot of that, like, point scoring. It's like, well, I'm doing all of this.
Term,
but I'm doing all of this. And what they're both saying is, I'm maxed out. And I feel like you don't understand or see what it is that I'm doing. And actually what I say to a lot of them, it sounds like this really forced and an unnatural task, but it's like, sit down with each other and write down everything that you feel that you're holding. And this isn't in a way that it has to then be even. For some couples, it's important that it is even and they might give tasks to each other. But it's an acknowledgement of, wow, I didn't know that you were holding all of that. And it's important that we feel seen. It's important that we feel appreciated. And it's important that there's this renegotiation of things like that, because again, before children, it may be that we could do things a certain way. And then after children, it may be that we need to renegotiate who's holding what. Because actually the statistic is that women now are obviously working much more than they were generations ago when they were mothers, but they are still holding about 75% of the unpaid labor at home.
Is it that high still? Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there is this growing resentment of, please help me. But what, again, I see with a lot of couples is that women also don't necessarily know and appreciate everything that their partners are holding. We've had in my household the past year, we've been doing a lot of DIY on our house. And so I have felt at times like, oh my gosh, I'm doing everything. I do all the nursery stuff. I do all the preschool emails and costumes and all of that stuff that has to be done.
It's relentless, right? It really is.
It's relentless. And I think at times, come on, help me. You're not doing any of this stuff. And then, of course, he's spending his weekends doing DIY on the house. And I don't always have that appreciation that actually he's holding all of that stuff as well.
And is it all right to work? Because sometimes as couples, you might, and even kind of pre-kids, you might naturally fall into things that you do. So one of you might be the person who does the DIY, has those skills. One of you may be better, with computer and tech or bills. So you might have those kind of roles anyway. So therefore, it might be harder to then appreciate what it is like doing a job that isn't your thing, or you might not have an understanding of.
Yeah, and that delegation of tasks is actually really important, because us both knowing everything about what the other one is holding is actually wasted resource. We can't hold all of that. We can't both know everything that's going on at school, every date that needs remembering. And again, a really practical thing that I sort of say to couples is like, get a timetable, like literally have something that is like, here's all the clubs, here's all the dates. So I haven't got to hold it all in my head. I'm not expecting you to also have to hold it all in your head, but here it is. We can both see it.
Yeah, but also because I think, if one of you gets ill, something happens, is that sudden, okay, right, what do we do? And having it there, having it kind of owned, I guess, by both of you.
Yes.
Pressure off. But I'm wondering whether that's
this is the
also perhaps
thing.
where problem solving comes as well, because it might be that one of you catches, and I've certainly had that before, and go, there's too much stuff here. Because when it's in your head, you don't always realise we've got too many clubs, or this isn't sustainable, or it's not really in line with our values anymore. When is the last time we've had something on the diary that's us going out, or value-based activity for either of us, things that maybe are there pre-kids, you know, your own time, the time out?
Yes. Yeah, and that actually, you know, takes me onto this idea between couples of these areas of prioritization. So I talk to couples about there are 4 areas of prioritization in a family. The first is your kids. So your kids quite often are the priority. They take up most of the time. They worm their ways in as being the priority most of the time. The second is yourself. So, you know, this is revolutionary to parents. You actually get to prioritize yourself sometimes. The
Refreshing.
third is your partner, that sometimes, you know, your partner's needs need to come before yours and need to come before your children. And the fourth is your relationship. So as like a separate identity, that bit in the middle of that Venn diagram at times needs to be prioritized. And that might look like a date night. It might look like a day out. It might look like, actually, do you know what? You guys are going to bed half an hour earlier tonight, and we're going to sit and have dinner or watch a movie. And there's going to be no messing around. And if you're calling to us to come up and attend to you for the 5th time because your cover's not quite right, we're not going to do it. And it can sound quite harsh. And what I say to couples, you know, is like, it's you guys versus the kids. You are the team. And again, a lot of quite worried looks from people when I say that, because it sounds really harsh, but actually our relationship is the foundation of our family. So it has to be solid and it has to be stable for our kids to feel solid and stable. And so it has to be prioritized. And like you say, if we're mapping out everything that we're doing and we're noticing, my God, where's the time for me? Where's the time for you? Where's the time for us? That then really needs to be attended to.
And I'm thinking as well, because sometimes what you might do is we're not so great at noticing ourselves, maybe if we're overwhelmed with doing too much, but that might bring in the compassion that one of you might notice with the other one. Do you know, how are you doing all that? How are you going to get from there to there and do something for you? Or when is the last time? I haven't seen you put your meeting with your friend on the calendar for a while, or you see what I mean? That kind of compassion-based stuff, which is the foundation, because that, as you say, that relationship was there before kids. And sometimes I think it's really interesting you said about guilt. Yeah, that you might feel guilty about putting the relationship first. And it's hard, isn't it? Parent guilt's enormous. Big inner critic that can...
absolutely massive. It is massive, because what we're sort of told is that when kids come along, it's all supposed to be about them.
Yes. Yeah. So we've got this kind of society perpetuating it as well as our own inner critic. It can be a lot. And is it all right to say, so well, if you work with couples, so if you're thinking, you know, like in terms of my journey, if it's ever involved IVF, fertility treatment, extra pressures and things, sometimes then this child that comes along that is much longed for and is sometimes already taken a lot out of the relationship and your bodies and your minds can mean you're less able to put boundaries in, and that child may almost be kind of, you know, more at the centre. You know, this is this baby I've longed for. I've gone through all these rounds of IVF for, so therefore I can't step back and prioritise other things. And I'm just wondering whether that comes into your work at all as well. Especially, you know, I've had friends who've adopted, for example, where the process has been, you know, just at times utterly draining. So therefore there are different things there around, wow, we finally got this much longed for child.
And you see, like you say, with kind of children who are adopted, or children born through IVF, or children after parents have experienced a loss, or a baby dying, you know, that there's this really, you know, children are precious anyway, but there's this extra precious, you know, that sense in us to protect goes up a notch. And so they are very much more, like you say, the center of things.
And you might not realize sometimes that you're doing that, you know, that it's very easy to get caught up in those cycles. And you know, I just think because what I love about your work as well is it's when people will give people your Instagram and things at the end as well, but letting people know it's all right talk about this stuff, and therefore hopefully maybe even just one or two people listening to this, watching this, going, I don't think I've ever spent time looking at my dynamic with my kids and my relationship, or that it's okay to look and make change.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, like, we feel like, when do we have the time and the energy to give this thought and give this attention? But it is still very much not spoken about because of the shame. I'm supposed to love every minute of having a child, and of course the reality is that we do not love every minute of
And
having a
that's
child.
okay, right?
That is okay. And actually, ways to combat that kind of misplaced resentment about your children is just to acknowledge it. It's just to accept it. And it's to be able to say to each other, we our 1-year-old really doesn't sleep well, and we didn't have that with our first at all. He was a dream sleeper, so we naively thought that's just going to be the same second time, and oh my gosh, it is not the same the second time. And you can tell after one of those nights where nobody's had very much sleep, you kind of get up in the morning and there's just this tension because nobody has slept. And actually, it would be so easy to snap at each other. Come on, you're not doing, I was up one more time than you were up last night, so I'm more tired. And it's about kind of saying to each other, God, that was rough, wasn't it?
The compassion. And I guess there's something, isn't there, around trying to catch yourself in those cycles of point scoring, which I'm guilty of at times. I know exactly that. One more time than you, or I've got the busier day today. I did this yesterday, or even I did this, a year ago, or the last time we had a newborn. It's the point scoring stuff is really, really hard, isn't it? Oh, my screen's just frozen. Is yours?
Yeah, it looks like my camera is frozen.
Ooh, let me I remember what we're talking about. Let me just check my internet connection. That's a pain in the bum. Where's that happened? Can you see me move? Am I moving your end?
You're moving for me, but I'm not moving. So my internet looks fine as well.
How bizarre. It might just come back. Give it a moment.
Shall I try stopping my camera and then try starting it again? Will that work?
It's worth a shot. We love a bit of tech. Right. There we go. Just the joys. Modern tech. Modern internet. It just carries on. So I'll just cut and paste. And StreamYard. I don't know if you use StreamYard. It's so easy to use. You can use it to live stream to all your. I got a colleague who wrote my other book with, and she uses it to live stream to all her socials at once. So if you ever want to do a video, but you want like an overlay or stuff, it's just a bit easier to do it like on Instagram Live. You can live stream to whatever socials or whatever. So you can use it to record if you want to make videos for yourself, but you can also use it to stream, podcast, it all sorts of. Super handy. So we're talking about compassion. I'm just trying to think where we're going. So I'm going to start going back in with my point scoring. So if I kind of start again with that bit, and then hopefully we are still recording, so we're all right. I just cut and paste it together. So I was thinking about point scoring. As you said earlier, there might be that, as you say, I was up one more time than you, but then sometimes I've noticed point scoring for me would be, but my day is more busy, so therefore, you need to be doing this now, or even bringing up stuff from like a while back, but with our first baby, I did more nights, and I can see how it's really easy then to just get in this cycle of negativity, then kind of catching it, as we say, noticing what you're getting hooked with, and kind of be really compassionate, and even just owning it and going, I'm so sorry, I was blaming there, or just owning it.
Yeah. That's so much of it is about even later on being able to
Yeah.
come back to your partner
Yeah.
and say, I'm really sorry I was snappy this morning. I'm really struggling with the sleep or whatever it is. That we might not always be able to control it in the moment, but it
And
is,
that we don't have to. We're not robots who can in the moment always catch our stuff, right? You know, sometimes we get cross, we feel, we respond. Part of the human condition, right?
Yeah, it is. And like you say, it is that it's having compassion for each other. Like we're in this together and it's hard
Yes.
for both of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And so much of the point scoring we get out of when we truly listen to the other person. You know,
Yeah.
so much of the time we're listening and we're waiting for our response, which is, yeah, but I'm doing X, Y, Z. And actually hearing, wow, you are holding a lot, you know, and with, you know, with some couples it's not even, it's not where it needs to be, and sometimes it does
Yeah.
need attending to, but it's also that acknowledgement that our experiences are going to be different. So it's actually really different being a mum than being a dad. That
And
experience is
that's okay
different.
to say as well.
Yeah, you know, physically, obviously, as a mum, if you've had the child yourself, then you've been through the pregnancy, you've been through the birth, you've been through the recovery, you may have been through the feeding. It's a lot, it's a massive toll. And the expectation on mums also still is that we do most of the childcare. And now is that we should be working. So the expectations on
Yeah.
mum is massive. The change in mum, you know, physically, emotionally, hormonally, is massive. And dads don't get it. And of course they don't get it. How on earth could they get it? But also for dads, you know, they have a hard time too. You know, they don't do that initial bonding. They're not with baby when baby's inside. It's hard for them to
Yeah.
watch their partner going through birth. It's scary for them to not have any control over that. They're not involved in the feeding early on, so they can feel a bit kind of redundant, not really knowing
Yeah.
what to do. And things quite often, what people notice is that men really struggle with the sleep deprivation, really struggle being tired and not having slept. And their bodies are not primed to deal with sleep deprivation in the same way that women's are. Now, that doesn't
So
mean that we should be
important to say
doing
that.
more of it,
Yeah.
but it's acknowledging, okay, I hear, you know, we can often hear like, why are you moaning? You weren't up as much as me.
Yeah.
But men's
So
bodies are
common, right?
struggling in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. They're trying to have compassion. So it's not that we're invalidating our own experiences as mums who have given birth or who have been up at night, but it's also just, again, it's come back to, I like fact-based stuff as well. This is physiology as well. And sometimes it's useful to come back to, okay, this is my emotional response, but also, come on, let's come back. And educating ourselves, which we can do through talking and listening to podcasts and you know, having discussions. I didn't realize that the male body worked this way. I didn't realize. Did you know that women's bodies can take this long to recover, or hormones can, you know, we don't have those conversations, I don't think, as much as we should do.
Absolutely not. And, you know, I've been reading the Motherkind book, which is Zoe Blaskey. So she does Motherkind podcast, and she's just written the book, which is amazing. And in there she talks about that actually women's brains change during pregnancy and postpartum more than they do during adolescence. So the change in a woman is absolutely massive. Yeah. And understanding all those hormone changes, you know, I know for me in the last year, went through the pregnancy, had a C-section, have that recovery, and then feeding wise, I pumped for the entire year, so exclusively expressed, which was hard work, and baby had allergies, so I couldn't eat the stuff that I wanted to be eating and all of that. And then
the thinking about when and how you eat, then, you know, not just grabbing whatever here, you know.
and when am I going to pump? You know, it's like trying to get your pump in on a train or something like that, or between clients at work. You know, it's hard work. And hormonally, you know, actually I'd gotten into this like steady place, and then when he turned 1 and I stopped pumping, suddenly there was this massive change in my hormones. And you kind of don't think of that a year on, that you would still be going through this recovery. And that, you know, was something that we had to navigate together, was that actually now I'm feeling something completely different than I was for the last year. And how's that impacting us? And actually I needed my husband to do more than he had been doing for a little while, because I was then coping with something else.
And that you need to have a conversation around that.
Yeah.
How much of
Yeah.
this stuff we just push down, and sometimes we can, again that, if we're both therapists, aren't we? If we're kind of looking at people's formulations, then what is your history of bringing up tricky stuff in a relationship? Have you brought up stuff before and been rejected, or had conflicts? So sometimes we don't bring stuff up because of our individual formulations, and I think that's important to address as well, isn't it? Especially in kind of couples work.
Absolutely. And so much of what I hear from couples is exactly what you're saying, is like, well, why don't you talk to me about this? And it's like, well, I don't feel like I can talk to you because previously you've given me these responses, and people saying, but that was like 5 years ago. And people saying, yes, but that's what I've internalized about how you respond to me. And so it's really having those conscious conversations and updating that narrative and that formulation.
Yes. And the kind of, we call it, leaning in. Sometimes we have to embrace those emotions, those thoughts about what might happen, because the value is what is the value in having the conversation? What is the value about revisiting your relationship or addressing something really tricky? And I think sometimes if we're able to come back to that a little bit, it can make those conversations a bit easier, or even just being honest and going, oh, I'm really worried about bringing something up. Can we talk about this? Just owning and being vulnerable can really help.
Yes. And actually, if for some reason that conversation really doesn't feel safe for you at home, because the two of you have got a history of conflict, that's where things like couples counselling can come in really helpful, to start doing that in that kind of safe environment with somebody else, so that you can then start taking that home and doing that together on your own.
And I was going to ask you a tricky question. So obviously, because you've been qualified a really long time as well, do you think there's been a shift in kind of how people see couples therapy? So I see individual people, and sometimes I notice there's still a little bit of the, couples therapy, I'm not sure. And then I've noticed a lot more of, oh, yes, actually, that sounds like a really good idea. I'm just wondering, where are we at kind of in Britain? Put you on the spot in terms of how we see it.
I still think there's some of that, like you said at the beginning, that's like, oh no, not couples therapy. And the difficult thing with couples therapy is there's, people can take a long time to come around to the idea of having individual therapy for themselves. So to get both people aligned on coming at the same time, can be a challenge. But like, I do think that people are coming more around to the idea, and
which is great.
It's so great, because actually what we want people to be doing is coming before there are massive issues.
Yes.
To catch it when it's early. And actually, I really encourage people to come almost like as a preventative measure.
I was going to say, absolutely,
so premarital counselling, come before you get married. Think about all the things that could trip you up in marriage. Think about when we're going to have children, how's it going to look? Come in the early days of parenting, where there might not be anything majorly wrong in terms of your relationship, but like we've been talking about, it's going to change. So let's come and navigate that change. And all the way through the journey as a couple, at any point, if things are going wrong, come to couples counselling. If actually the two of you have already decided you don't want to be together, come for breakup counselling. Not as an attempt to save the relationship, but as a, how are we going to manage this moving forward if we have children? But also, like, let's talk to each other about why this has gone wrong. Let's move forward with that understanding. Let's ask all the questions we need to ask for the closure.
In the safe space, because that's the
couples,
thing about, the therapist can hold that. And I'm not sure whether people know that enough, that it's about a safe space, a neutral space. This person isn't your friend, your relative who's going to dip in with advice. It's just providing a platform for you both to be heard and look at those issues together.
Yeah. And that's the thing for couples. I think so much of the time it feels so private. They don't like to involve, like we were saying at the very beginning, people don't tend to talk to each other about their relationships. And so even the idea of coming and talking to a therapist, because quite often also what scares people is that we're probably going to be talking about emotional intimacy. We're probably going to be talking about physical intimacy. And that's okay. Like your therapist is okay to talk about sex. It's fine. It's fine, because that's another thing that changes in a relationship, your intimacy.
And that can be a barrier to having a healthy relationship, can't it?
Yeah, and especially when we introduce children into a relationship, that
Absolutely.
changes, and navigating that change is really difficult. And more often, not always, but more often, what you see is that guys are struggling with that change
Yeah.
more than women.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's having that appreciation of the changes that you both have gone through, but women, especially physically, hormonally, they might be really touched
Absolutely.
out by the end of the day. Intimacy changes, and it's about understanding why that's happened. Is this kind of a natural thing that we can get back on track, not necessarily getting back to where it was, but
Yes.
moving
That's
forward
important
into
to
a
discuss.
new.
Yeah. 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 Almost
Yeah.
that sometimes can be an elephant in the room. And I know of friends, I know people individually that I've seen in my work, where there can be I don't want to bring it up because what if it wasn't what it was before? And I kind of think you almost need to kind of move away from that myth that it should be exactly the same as it was when we first got together or when we were first,
Yeah.
at different times. There's just different life stages as well. We change even though we're not parents as we go through our 20s, 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
don't we? And
Yeah.
having a space to be able to formulate all of that stuff is important, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Physiologically, emotionally, we change, and it's important for us to know that, and we need to really stop this bounce back culture,
Yeah.
which is that women are supposed to bounce back physically. How quickly can you get back in your pre-pregnancy
Yeah.
genes? Bounce
Yeah.
back in terms of work. You're supposed to go back to work like nothing ever happened, but that your relationship is supposed to bounce back, your intimacy is
Yes.
supposed to bounce back to what it was, and it's not going to. And it is about now finding what it's going to be in a way that hopefully pretty much suits both of you.
Yeah.
It's actually incredibly hard to get a couple 100% aligned in intimacy because each of you have different wants and needs and levels and
Yes.
desires. But can we move forward in a new way of doing things that pretty much works for you both?
And that's okay to have those conversations, to be vulnerable. As you
Yes.
say, sometimes there's that ick factor or the shame, or we don't do that, or sometimes quite a lot of rule bound stuff comes into people having therapy, doesn't it? We don't talk about this stuff in my family, or
Oh
if you've
my
been brought up
gosh.
that way, a lot of those kind of rules and rule bound cognitions can get in the way, can't they? And I guess that's part of having podcasts like
Yes.
this, is to start, if there's a dude sat on a train, if there's a new mum or someone listening to this, just to go, it's all right to start to even think about your
Yeah.
own ick or cringe in discussing it, and coming back to your values. How could it make life better for you to discuss this stuff with your partner?
Yeah.
Or begin that journey, even just saying, hey, even if, sometimes it's really hard to dive straight in, even kind of like passing your phone, hey, here's a podcast I've just listened to. Let's, go in that way.
Yes.
What do you think? Let's start a discussion
Yeah.
about the podcast.
Yeah, and that's where I think actually like social media can be really useful in, those posts that people are putting out, in seeing those, in liking them, in just sharing them. You don't have to put this out there yourself, but if you share
Yeah.
somebody's post that is talk,
And
then
you can share those reels. I send reels to people all the time, but if you're in a relationship, just sharing the reel is kind of just starting that, hey, this is something that's caught my attention. Can it lead to a conversation?
yes, exactly. And like you say, there's so much in there about what we've learned over our lives from our parents, about what's okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk
Yeah.
about. And that gets even more intensified when we have children, because when we become parents, we kind of re experience being parented. And so those values and those rules and things were instilled in
Absolutely.
us become even louder.
Yeah. So in terms of social media then, so I love following what you do. Not just because I know you, but it's just a lot of it resonates with me, and at different stages of parenting as well, which is why I like your work.
Mm.
If people want to find you, where do you hang out? How can we hear more about you?
So my main voice is on like Instagram. That's where I am. And the handle is at the parent underscore therapist. So yeah, if you're looking for just stuff around parenting, stuff around the experience of parenting, how we can make the experience work best for us, then please come onto my Instagram page and just have a look at the stuff that I'm posting. Please also send
Absolutely.
me messages about things that you want to see more of, because
Yes.
everybody's experience is so different. That I would love to hear, what people are struggling with in terms of parenting, what they would like to know in terms of parenting. And actually, if you go onto my website, so my counselling name is SB Counselling. So if you go to sbcounselling.org, you can download my free couples in parenting guide, which is all about, what
Fantastic.
couples are experiencing and things that we can do to try and mitigate some of that, try and help some of that, try and move forward in a healthy way with each other.
So those are the kind of things you can kind of just start a conversation around. Hey, look, here's a website. Oh, look, here's a guide. Sometimes people we all process information differently, don't we? So sometimes people do the old kind of equivalent of Christmas time and leaving the magazine open on that thing that you would really like, but you don't want to say, right? So we could just, here's a website, here's a guide. It just happens to be on the coffee table.
Yeah,
I'll
and
make
actually,
sure.
ask your friends, like, how are
Yeah.
you? How are you guys together? How are you both navigating this
Yes.
new baby? Like, ask the questions.
So it's that kind of cringy, but I love it. The normalizing the conversations, right? So when you meet up with other parents, how often do we go, how are you guys getting on? That's such a good point, isn't it? It tends to be, how are you? Or if you're in, individual discussions, or how's baby, which is lovely, but maybe we need to kind of have a little bit more of how are you guys doing?
Yeah, and challenging ourselves also to answer those questions honestly.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks us, and how are you guys doing? It's being able to say, oh, actually, like, we've been finding it tough. We've found that we're really snapping at each other. We're sad that we haven't got time for each other. Whatever the answer is to that question is just trying to, I guess, kind of, on a level with your partner where you're kind of checking with them, does this feel okay for us to share? But trying to be honest and showing people, like, it's okay to struggle. It's normal.
And it is. Yeah. So it is. And I always think anyone who says they aren't, because again, when we're looking at everyone's social media and their birthday parties and everything looks fantastic, again, those can be the barriers, can't they? So that's what I really love about your Instagram. It is kind of the opposite of all of that. This is how it should be. And I like those real conversations. So I do ask everybody, we've had loads of nuggets, but if there was one little adversity takeaway that you could leave us with, what would it be?
I think for me, and it sounds like such a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, that within relationships, it is all about communication. So it is just saying it to your partner. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. I'm resenting you. I'm resenting the kids. I'm resenting society. I'm tired. Whatever it is, tell the other one, and for the other one to listen with compassion.
Yeah, that kind of, and there's a difference between listening and hearing, isn't there?
Yes.
And I think that's really important. I'm definitely going to have you on again. Time has just flown by because there's so many
I would love to.
My brain is in Tara mode going, I'd really love to follow that up a bit more. And I'm wondering whether we almost could do with doing an episode just looking at the intimacy bit, really delving in there, because that's something I don't see enough about myself written about, and it causes quite big fractures in relationships, can't it? But it's still cringy to talk about. Suzie, thank you so much. So lovely to see you. Amazing we get to see each other podcast, but meeting up, right, it'll make us shame us into meeting up. Pin me down. Thank you so much for coming on, and I can't